I think now it's done. Okay, great. So let's start. Okay. And what I want to do today, so I know that this is the part of the course which is a little bit complicated for the students. You know, every year it's the same, but once it's done, it's going to be better and a little bit simpler. Okay. Yes, we started this question of, so just to remember you, yesterday, yes, precisely. Okay, good. So yesterday we studied this question of liquidity insurance by financial intermediaries. So if you remember well, the idea is to say that a bank can be seen as a liquidity reserve that will provide depositories with insurance against idiosyncratic shock. But remember, for this to work, we have to consider idiosyncratic shock in order to be able to use the law of large number. And the result is that the optimal location, which is defined by this relationship, so this optimal allocation is possible with the introduction of a bank. Okay, this is something that we saw yesterday. And so what you have to understand is that, okay, if I consider pi 1, if I consider for only one person, pi 1 is the probability of having the liquidity shock, of suffering the liquidity shock at t equal 1. But for a lot of people, but if you consider, let's say, a mass of people, then pi 1 becomes the proportion of people who are going to be hit by the liquidity shock. So the difference between, and this is because liquidity shocks are, because let's say liquidity shocks are IID. This is very important, else it doesn't work. But the difference is that if you consider one person, you don't know whether the liquidity shock for that person is going to occur or not. But if you consider a population, let's say, you know for sure that there is one proportion of the population which is going to be hit by the liquidity shock. And this proportion is pi 1. Let's say, for instance, pi 1 is 20%. So in that case, well, there is 2 chances over 10 to be hit by the liquidity shock. But if you consider a population, you know that 20% of people are going to suffer from the liquidity shock. But this is for sure. There is no longer uncertainty, while there is uncertainty. So basically, this is the amount which is going to be withdrawn at equal 1. C1 is for one individual, but you multiply by the proportion of individuals which are going to suffer from the liquidity shock. So you see, shocks have to be independently distributed. And introducing a bank allows to reach the optimal allocation. So this is really a strong result. But there is one big problem which is well known, and we are going to talk about that later when we'll see the question of regulation is the problem of bank runs. So, are you already aware of a bank run? Do you know what is a bank run? Do you know what a bank run is? Have you already heard about that? No? No one? No, it's not a question of okay. So some of you knows already and other don't know. Okay, it's not a problem. But this is something that you should be aware of because it's a real danger. I told you already yesterday, this is a real danger for a financial market and more precisely for the banking market. And there are many examples throughout the world of historical bank runs. I'm going to talk about that later. Okay. So the rule, if you want to withdraw money, is related to what is called the sequential service of deposits. In the sense that the first come, the first is served. And this can lead to bank runs. And in particular, a problem for a firm is something that we talked already about, which is the transformation of maturity. I don't know if you remember, we talked already about that. Yes, maturity transformation. So this asset transformation, this can lead to bank run. Why? Because I told you already, well, you know, yes. So if you consider deposits, we are talking about short-term, it's kind of short-term debt, very short-term debt. But if you consider credits, it is long-term asset. So there is a mismatch between how the bank is financed in its liability side compared to the kind of assets which are included in the asset side of its balance sheet. And so there is a problem if everybody is willing to withdraw money at the same time. Okay, why? Because on the other side, in the asset side, well, in order to repay people, the bank would have to liquidate long-term assets. And first, it takes time, and the price is going to be low compared to what is asked by people. So if everybody is doing that, the bank necessarily goes to bankruptcy. And this would be an example of a bank run. Okay, this is the idea of people rushing to their bank in order to withdraw money. So even if the bank is solvable due to the mismatch between short-term debt and long-term investment, the bank is not able to repay everybody, and therefore the bank is going to bankruptcy. And this is an example of what is called a bank run. Okay, but let me show you in more details this slide. I presented already this slide yesterday, but this is something which is very important. So I want to spend more time on it. Okay. Do you have questions so far? Let me know. No question? Sure. Okay. Okay. So we know that this possibility is an equilibrium, and it is, let's say, the good equilibrium. This is the good equilibrium. Why am I talking about the good equilibrium? Because actually the optimal allocation is possible through the introduction of a bank. Okay, we are well aware of this result. But the problem is that this equilibrium is not unique. This equilibrium is unfortunately not the only equilibrium which exists. There is at least one other equilibrium which is a bad one. So consider that all investors but one withdraw at =1. So the question we are considering now is, so let's say you've got kind of n investors, and there are n-1 investors which withdraw at =1. So the question is, what would be a good decision for the last investor? Withdrawing or not withdrawing? Okay, that's the point. But actually, if everybody but one investor withdraw at =1, the bank is obliged to liquidate its long-term investment. Because even by doing that, the bank is not going to be able to repay everybody. Okay, this is basically what we were talking about just before. So if you consider let's say the last investor, that guy know that if he or she waits up to t=2, well, the bank would have already defaulted, and therefore it would obtain just 0. Waiting for t=2 imply obtaining from the bank 0. So of course, this investor is also going to withdraw at =1. So this is the bad equilibrium in which everybody is rushing to the bank at =1, and therefore it destroys the possibility for the bank to provide to the investor the optimal allocation of liquidity. Okay, but this is an equilibrium, a Nash equilibrium. Okay, and this is basically the problem of a bank run. So there are, well, so remember, this is a concrete example. Like in England, for instance, it happened during the previous huge financial crisis. So in 2007 or 2008, during the worldwide subprime mortgage financial crisis, and of course, in developed countries, it is rather unusual, but it could happen. So there are few remedies, not many, but we can think of some of them. So, for instance, suspension of convertibility. So if it is possible, the bank can commit not to serve more than a proportion =1 of depositors. at equal 1. We can also think of a kind of a deposit insurance by a central bank or a government. So if this is the case, a depositor knows that whatever happens to the bank, he or she is going to be able to obtain C2 star at equal 2. So it is this taking into account a deposit insurance allows to remove this question of rushing in order to obtain money at equal 1, because you are afraid not to obtain anything at equal 2. And kind of narrow banking, which is to say, the bank must have more reserves than just, so reserves higher than pi 1 C1 star. Okay, but let me ask you a question. Do you know in Vietnam examples of bank runs? What do you think about that? Yes? Okay, so this is something that you are aware of this problem, because what I want to stress is that this is very concrete. Okay, this is a concrete problem, both for depositors, but also for a government, because it is going to affect the solidity of the banking market. Okay. Okay. So now we're gonna see something else, which is, so this is another theory explaining the existence of financial intermediaries, and this is called liquidity creation and security design. So as usual, you've got in the first slide, you've got the main ideas associated with this question of liquidity creation and security design. So first, uninformed investors want liquid assets. That is, assets. So are you aware with this notion of liquidity? I'm going to define a little bit more after. So uninformed investors prefer liquid assets. That is, assets with a low sensitivity to information. Sensitivity is related to how prices react to information. Okay, so a liquid asset is, so there are, by the way, there are at least two definitions of what a liquid asset is, but the one I would like to focus on this morning is this one. So this is an asset whose price is quite stable. That is not affected by news information. This is what we're gonna call a liquid asset. Okay. And you see, here we are talking about uninformed investors. So these are investors which don't have information. So this is why they prefer liquid assets. Else, they would lose money by not having the good information in some extent. Okay, so this is a fact. Point one. The second point is what a financial intermediary is able to do. Once again, let's say what a bank is able to do. So we're going to see that banks create such securities by offering deposit contract as riskless claims on the risky assets of the bank. Okay, so there is a risk transformation which is done by banks. And this is something that uniform investors want. And this also leads to a rationale for deposit insurance and government bonds. So the model, okay. So by the way, this is what is called Kyle model. I don't know. Let me just check something. Yes. Here, you've got precise references. Okay. But there is one which is missing over there. Well, whatever. So the model we are going to use now is related to Kyle model. Just to give you the name of the guy who developed this model. So there are three dates: t equals 0, t equals 0, 1, 2. So you've got a mass one of investors, and they buy one asset, let's say, at an initial price P0. But as we're going to see, these investors are quite different one from the other. So at t equal 1, some investors might have to trade, and this is for this investor, this is exogenous. Okay, so this is something that we're gonna call noise or liquidity traders. Okay, so let's say liquidity traders. So why is it the case? So if you remember the previous theory, you can say that at t equal 1, some of the investors are hit by liquidity shock, and therefore they have to liquidate their portfolios. Okay, and these are liquidity traders. Okay, but the problem is that at that time they might face better informed traders. So what we have in mind is that these informed traders, for instance, they know the true value of the asset at t equal to 2. So this is a problem because, of course, the price at which the asset is going to be exchanged at t equal 1 reflect what people think about the future value of the asset at t equal 2. Okay, and at t equal 2, well, the asset either generates a positive return or just 0. And so this is the ex ante distribution, kind of non-conditional distribution. So theta, of course, belongs to 0, 1, let's say. And to make the model interesting, we're going to take these open interval. Okay, so this is theta is probability, right? Is that clear for everybody? Okay. Okay, I see. So ABC, that Vietnamese bank close to bankruptcy. Okay. What is the meaning of ABC? Let me know. I am interested in. No? No one is willing to answer the question? What is ABC? Sorry, not ACD, ACB, sorry. Okay, I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I see. Okay. Okay, so I repeat, is the model clear? But this is important to understand the following. So far, there is no computation, just understanding the model. Yes? Okay. So I continue. So what about trading at t equal 1? So there is one speculator, which is going to be the informed investor. Okay, and that guy is able to learn the realization of x at t equal 2. Let's say that by paying a cost. So if by paying k, which is strictly positive, he or she knows for sure the realization of x at t equal 2. So the basic idea is to say that if x is going to be x age, he wants to buy the asset. And if x is going to be 0, he or she wants to sell the asset. Okay, and you also have liquidity traders which have to buy or sell, but this is exogenous. Okay, so if they sell, for instance, this is associated with a liquidity shock that they encounter. And in that case, for instance, they receive, I don't know, a gift, in heritage, and they invest in the financial market. And without loss of generality, consider that this probability is 1/2. And you also have market maker who observe the pair of offer, but not the origin. That is to say, for instance, they can observe, so one possibility, example, it is to observe minus D, okay? So if you observe minus D, you don't know whether this minus D is from the liquidity trader or from the speculator. Okay, and of course, what they do is that they compute P1, but P1 now is different from P0, or could be different from P0. By the way, we're going to talk about P0 later on. Why? Because you have P1, you have one more information. So in some extent, P0, we'll see that it is a little bit more complicated, but P0 is basically just the expectation of X. What I am ready to pay is the expectation of S. Okay, so basically it is theta XH, right? P1 is a little bit different. Why? Because you have more information, which is the order flow that you observe. So the price now is conditional on the order flow at t equal 1. So this is conditional. Okay. So P1 is, sorry. Yes. Okay. So you have one more information. And of course, you are going to make a conditional expectation based on this new information. Okay. So let me give you an example. So you are thinking about doing studies at CFVG, but you are not quite sure. And you talk to one guy who last year did study in CFVG. So if that guy tells you, well, you should do that because you know it's really good training, professors are so good, and so on and so forth, I'm pretty sure that you are going to be willing to do some studies in CFVG. Okay, so by doing this, you are doing conditional expectation. Okay, so every day we are all doing conditional expectation. based on new information that we acquire day after day. Okay. Aha. So what about the speculator trades? Well, if it can be uninformed, of course, this is not what we are interested in. But if the speculator prefer not to pay the cost K, then she is uninformed, and his or her offer is just equal to 0. But this is not the case, which is interesting. Okay. So if it is clear, I'm going to erase this. Is that clear for everybody? If you don't have information, you do not intervene. That's the point. I repeat, if you don't have information, you do not intervene. So what is more interesting is the following. What is going to be the position, let's say, on the financial markets of an informed speculator? Okay, so this is the case of an informed speculator. Okay, and this is basically what we said previously. So in that case, you're going to have plus D. So the guy is willing to buy. And in that case, we're going to have minus D. So that guy is willing to sell. Okay, short sales. Okay, so if, let's say, she observes X age, the speculator is going to have a long position. This is called plus D, is a long position. But if you see that the return is going to be nothing, 0, so you don't want to invest in this asset, but even you want to have a short position, short sale. Okay, are you familiar with these two notions? Let me know. Do you know what long position and short position are? No, you don't? Yeah, basically, that's right. Okay, that's the point. Yes, long you buy, you invest in, and short you sell. Okay, you prefer to sell. Okay, that is the correct answer. Okay, so let me pursue. So I'm going to spend time on what is behind, because it is important. Okay. So basically, you have 4 possibilities. Minus D, or let's say plus D, plus D. 1 possibility. plus D minus D, second possibility, minus D plus D, third possibility. And the last one, the fourth possibility, is minus D minus D. Okay? So there are two situations in which the financial market is able to know perfectly what is going to be the realization of the asset at equal 1. If you consider that case, well, you see that both of the people who are going to intervene at equal 1 on the financial market, they both want to buy. So in that case, the market learn, thanks to that x is going to be equal to xh at t equal 2, because this is the only possibility in which you can have plus d, and therefore the price, which is the expectation of x knowing plus d, it is going to be equal to xh by 1. What about this possibility? So how could you interpret this flow of orders? What do you think? So the market, the financial market, now think what? That x is going to be equal to what at t equal 2? What do you think? X is necessarily equals to what in that case? Let me know. No idea. 0. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. Yes, precisely. 0. That's right. It is necessarily 0. And therefore, P1 is going to be equals to what? What do you think? Well, the price is going to reflect this information, and it is going to be equals to 0. So in these two cases, Pi1 correctly reflects the information acquired by the speculator. And the speculator in these two cases is unable to make money because P1 is a good price. But there are also the two other possibilities, these two possibilities. So in these two cases, well, this is there is no information which is revealed by these two situations. No information revealed to the market. So if there is no information revealed to the market, it implies that P1 is just the initial expectation of X. Okay, that is theta X H. And you see that in these two situations, the speculator is able to make money, because in this situation, in these two situations, the speculator has more information than the financial market. Okay, so for instance, if you have plus D minus D, the profit for the speculator is going to be D times XH minus theta XH. Okay, because the speculator knows that the value is going to be XH, but he or she only pays theta XH. Okay, and this is typically what is going to happen in this situation, that one. Okay, because there you have this possibility, and this is the position of the speculator. What about the other possibility, that one? So in this case, the profit for speculator is D times what? Well, it's going to sell at this price something which is going to be worth 0. So this is the profit the speculator is going to make. And this is basically this situation. Okay. Do you have questions so far? It's time. Let me know, please. Do not hesitate. Wake up. Come on. I don't see anything. No, no. TS, it is S for speculator, and DL, it is L for liquidity traders. And you have DS, which could be either plus D or DS false minus D. And same for liquidity traders. Okay. Other questions? No? That clear? Distinction between the S and the L? Okay, so no. So what about the profit of the speculator? Well, what we are interested in is these two situations once again. So if I consider that one, the probability of occurrence is 1/2 times theta. And the probability is going to be d times x8 minus theta x. And plus what? Plus this situation, the probability of occurrence is 1/2 times 1 minus theta times d, which is the position. It's a number. So for instance, you buy or you sell a number 10 assets. And in that case, you're going to receive theta x minus 0. Okay. So this is basically what you have here. And the second part is what you have here. And you end up with this profit. Okay, so this is the profit of the speculator. Okay, at t equal 1. So let me ask you a question. So at t equal 0, when you invest in the asset, you don't know if you're going to be hit by the liquidity shock. So the price you want to pay is not exactly E of x, because you anticipate that probably in the future you're gonna lose money. So you're gonna lose money on the profit, not informed, yes, that speculators are going to do. So the price you are willing to pay is the expectation of x minus the profit that speculators are going to do at t equal 1. Okay. Because else you would prefer to strictly keep the money with you. Okay, so what is important to understand is that speculator acquires information if and only if its expected profit is higher than the cost of acquiring information, and the price you are ready to pay at t equal 0 takes into account this profit. Okay, because actually the true expected value for you is the expected value of the underlying assets minus the profit that speculators are going to realize at t equal 1. Okay, so you anticipate this profit and you don't want to pay more than this because you anticipate that this profit at t equal 1 is going to be the profit of the speculator is going to be made in some extent on you. Okay, so this is basically the Kyle model. Okay, so this is a Kyle's model, and now we are going to consider, let's say, a bank, a financial intermediary. What about role of a bank? So consider now that there are n assets, not only a single asset, but n asset. Okay, n assets. So this is the notion of a bundle of assets. And you've got an intermediary, let's say a bank, right? And the bank is able to bundle the n assets together. And it allows the trading only in the bundle, not in each single asset, but in the bundle only. Okay, and well, basically the rest of the model is the same. At t equals 0, now you're not paying for only a single asset, but for the bundle of assets. And at t equals 1, same thing. The demand is either minus d or plus d, and you've got two kinds of demand: the demand of the speculator and the demand of the liquidity traders. But what is different now is that since only the bundle is traded at t equal 1 on the market, now the speculator has to acquire not only one piece of information, but n pieces of information, n pieces of information. That is, let's say, one piece of information for each asset. And since there are n assets, the full price is n times k. So the speculator is going to acquire information and to intervene in the market at t equal 1 only if pi, its profit, is higher than the price he or she has to pay now to acquire information on all of the n assets. Okay, and by the way, just to be sure that it is clear, you see that we are interested in liquid assets. Liquid assets, so you remember the price. So there is low sensitivity of the price of the asset to information. Okay. So in our case, it would be a situation in which, for instance, P1 is always equal to this. No modification. Whatever the situation. Okay? So whatever the situation. Okay? But you see that if the trading is only with respect to a single asset, it is not the case. Because in this situation, actually here at t equal 1, there are 3 different prices. P1 equals E of X, P1 equals 0, and P1 equal XH. So in this situation, the price sometimes reflects information. Okay, so in that case, we can say that this is not a liquid asset with always the same price. So I repeat, in this situation, it's not a liquid asset. Okay, so this is not what uninformed investors want, because they do prefer liquid assets. Okay, so what about the introduction of a bundle now of assets thanks to the introduction of a bank? Because you can see that the bank collects all the N assets. The bank pull together the N assets and resell only the bundle of the N assets to the financial market. Well, open your eyes. So, of course, you can see that this is equivalent to, so this is equivalent to 1 to pi divided by k being strictly higher than n. Okay. This is just equivalent. No, sorry, it's not what I want to write. What I want to write is, okay, so that is what I am interested in, right? Okay, but actually, so we want to be higher than k. But, well, forget about this inequality. Consider that you have the equality. So how could you define the profit? Well, this is the expectation of, because now we are considering a bundle of assets. And you are doing this only if you are going to earn money. So this is why you take the absolute value. Else, the speculator is not going to intervene in the financial market. Okay. So basically, this is the true value, which is observed by the speculator, and this is the price expected price. Okay, so for instance, previously we had xh minus theta xh, for instance. One example previously, okay? But if you consider this amount, you see that so D is just a number. So this is a number. So it is D times what? The expectation of what? You've got 1 over n sum of xi minus, well, actually what you have here is this. But this is also equals to the sum of the expectation xi, and they are iid. So this is equals to D times so this is a sum from 1 to n. So you've got n e of xi, and you see that you can simplify, and you obtain basically this expression. Okay, but if n is large enough, this is going to be equal to e of x, and therefore you're going to have something like D expectation of e of x minus e of x. So it tends to 0. Since this is going to tend to 0, it's impossible to have impossible. This is impossible. This is just impossible to have this. And so for n large enough, there is no information acquisition, implying that first at t equals 0, the price is just e of x, and also at t equals 1, the price is also e of x. So we've got something, now we've got liquid assets. And this is precisely what people are interested in. So thanks to the introduction, to sum up, thanks Thanks to the introduction of a bank, it is possible to transform an non-liquid asset. So each asset is non-liquid if it is traded separately. If traded correctly into an liquid asset, if traded together. Okay. Okay. So this is this idea of liquidity creation. Okay. So there are two questions. Great. Oh, mince. Sorry. So this is for the first question. The second question is about. Okay, I see. I see. Um, oh, sorry. Okay, so there is one question about GL equals to minus D plus D with probability equals to 1/2. Okay. So it's easy. It's to say that with probability 1/2, the guy is hit by a liquidity shock, a negative liquidity shock. You lose your job. With probability 1/2, you are, so if you consider at t equals 0, you think that you are going to lose your job with probability 1/2. In that case, you are going to sell. You are obliged to sell because you need money. And with probability 1/2, you have a positive liquidity shock. And in that case, you are going to invest. Okay, you receive an inheritance, for instance, and therefore you invest in the market. Sorry, you want me to do what? To write the reference, or to give you, because I don't think you have to read the article, but if you want, I can add the reference at the end of the slides. Is that what you want? Okay, I will. Another question. So why the probar for what? Sorry, I don't understand this question. Not 50-50? What this question? Why is the probar for D? Because for the trader, it's not exogenous. It's different for the trader. Because for the trader, it is related to the realization of x at t equal 2. So you're going to have xh with probability theta and 0 with probability 1 minus theta. So this is DL, liquidity trader position, either that one or that one. And this is for the speculator. For the speculator. So in that case, we're going to have ds, which is going to be equal to plus d, and ds in that case is going to be equal to minus d. So now this is going to happen with probability theta, probability 1 minus theta, and this with probability theta. Okay. No other question? So I think it's time to make a break. You agree? Okay. Let us make 20 minutes break. 20 minutes break, is that okay for you? 25 minutes? You agree? Let me know. Yes? Okay. So let's do that. See you in 25 minutes. Okay? See you. You hear me? Hear me? Okay. Okay. So, shall we start again? It's time. Okay. So, let's start. So, I'm going to use slides. Okay. So, by the way, about this part on theories explaining the presence of financial intermediaries, well, just excuse me 1 second. Okay. So about second part on theories on financial intermediaries, let's say we are almost done. There are two more aspects. The one that we're going to see now, a basic credit market with moral hazard. We're going to do that through kind of exercise that we're going to do right now. And then we're going to discuss about real life, well, real situation in financial markets. I mean, the coexistence between direct financing and intermediated financing. Okay. And then we will go to something more applied, which is failures in banking regulation. So let's say not today, but for sure tomorrow, the theoretical part based on why financial intermediaries exist is going to be finished. Okay. So let's go for basic credit market with moral hazard. And by the way, I believe that this is important because we saw already a basic credit market with adverse selection. So you remember this? And there are three problems of asymmetric information: adverse selection, moral hazard, and costly state verification. And so we saw already a model of a credit market with adverse selection. So this is done. And now we'll see a basic credit market with moral hazard. So it's almost all the cases associated with asymmetric information except costly state verification, but I'm not quite sure that we'll see this. Okay, so let me read this slide. No questions so far? Do not hesitate if you have questions, okay? Once again, do not hesitate to interrupt me if you have questions, okay? Okay, so consider a firm, let's say an entrepreneur. So a firm or equivalently an entrepreneur. So consider an entrepreneur, a firm which wants to realize a new project. This project can either succeed or fail. So the result is binomial, either success or failure. Okay, only two possibilities. If it succeeds, the gain of the project are equal to V, capital V. While in case of failure, the result is just 0. And so remember, moral hazard, the question is, I don't know what you are doing. What are you doing? And actually, the behavior of the entrepreneur, the behavior of the entrepreneur is going to affect the probability of success. Okay, it's not that the entrepreneur is either good or bad. It's not a question of adverse selection. It is a question of behavior. And the behavior can be either good or bad. And this is going to affect the probability of success of the project the entrepreneur is running. Okay, so more or less it is like, obtaining good grades versus bad grades in the exam. If your behavior is good, you're gonna have good grades. If your behavior is bad, you're gonna have bad grades. Okay, it is related to what you do, but I don't observe what you are doing. Okay, so let's say that actually depending on, so if there is a good behavior, then so the result is not affected by the behavior, but the probability of success and of failure is affected. So this is in the case of good behavior, and in the case of a bad behavior, we have V with probability PL and 0 with probability 1 minus PL, with, of course, pH strictly higher than PL. But in the case of a bad behavior, the entrepreneur receives a private benefit plus P. So this is a private benefit. So one example is that, okay, the entrepreneur obtains money from a bank, and either the entrepreneur uses correctly this money, so he or she invests in the firm in order to, I don't know, to buy I don't know, something to produce a finite good, or the entrepreneur prefer to use this money to buy a luxury car or a sport car, Ferrari, or I don't know. So in that case, he or she is going to obtain a private benefit. And you see, the private benefit is independent of the realization of the project. It doesn't depend on the fact that the project is either a success or a failure. Okay, so I follow the. Je sais ma puce. Attends, je travaille là. Marie, il y a une caméra. Mais sorry, my daughter. Sorry. So the probability of success of the project depends on the behavior of the entrepreneur. If he behaves well, the probability of success is equal to pH, while if it is equal to PL if he behaves badly, with pH strictly higher than PL. Moreover, the entrepreneur enjoys a private benefit equals to B when behaving badly, while there is no private benefit if he behaves well. So in that case, no private benefit. Good behavior, no private benefit. And bad behavior, there is a private benefit. Okay. Okay, so we assume that the behavior of the entrepreneur is not observable outside the firm. And the private benefit is not transferable. So the private benefit is only enjoyable by the entrepreneur, but not by outside investors. Okay, but because the behavior of the entrepreneur is not observable outside the firm, and so not observable outside the firm, and costly, this is a problem of moral hazard. So by the way, let me ask you a question. Why can we say that it is costly to have a good behavior? Why is it true? Why is it true? So I repeat. Why is it true that having a good behavior is costly for the entrepreneur? Why is a good behavior costly? Let me know. Why is a good behavior costly? Well, yes, precisely. That's a good answer. Thank you very much. That's a good answer. Yeah, there is an opportunity cost. Precisely. There is an opportunity cost associated with the good behavior, because if you behave well, you don't benefit from the private benefit. Precisely. That's the point. That's the point. Okay. Because by doing a good behavior, you're not going to receive the private benefit. So there is an opportunity cost associated with the good behavior. Precisely. Thank you very much. That's the point. There is an opportunity cost associated with behaving well, because if the entrepreneur behaves well, she is not be able to benefit from the private benefit. Okay, that's precisely the point. Okay. Okay, so this is very important. The limited liability. So the entrepreneur is protected by the limited liability. So what is the meaning of the limited liability? So limited liability, so this is different from unlimited, of course, unlimited liability. The meaning in that what an entrepreneur can repay to repay to outside investors cannot be higher than what the project pays. So if we call our lenders, so if this is repayment to outside investors, well, in case of success, we have our lenders success, which should be lower than V. And in case of failure, we have our lenders failure, which should be equal to 0 because the project is not yielding anything. So this is limited liability. Okay, limited liability. Is that clear for you? Are you aware of this notion of limited liability? Okay. So so you know what limited liability is? Are you familiar with this notion? Because this is really important. I mean, if you want to do business, well, being protected by the limited liability is something very important for an entrepreneur. Is that clear? Yes, no question so far? Okay, so if there is no question, I pursue. Okay. Great. So we assume the following. We assume this. So by the way, sorry. Here we consider that entrepreneurs and well, both the entrepreneur and investors are risk neutral. And to simplify, it's really to simplify, there is no discount rate. Okay, it is just going to simplify computations, but it is without loss of generality. But there is no discounting. Okay, so what is the NPV of the project if good behavior? Well, it's very easy. You see that you're gonna have V with probability pH, 0 with probability 1 minus pH. This is at t equal 1, but we don't discount future, and the initial price you pay is minus capital I. So in that case, the net present value of the project is just PHV minus capital A. And we assume that this is positive. So in other words, if the entrepreneur behaves well, the NPV, the net present value of the project, is positive. So there is wealth creation in that case, right? So wealth creation. So in that case, it is worth undertaking the project. And what about the other inequality? So now, let's say, what would be the NPV of the project if bad behavior? Well, in that case, it would be PL, no longer PH, PL, V minus I. So you see that there is one difference because I don't take into account the private benefit. Why is it the case? Well, it is the case because, once again, the private benefit is not transferable. It is not transferable. So because it is not transferable to outside investors, you don't have to put it into the NPV. But we know that even if we take it into account, it is negative. Even if it is negative, even by taking into account the private benefit. So this implies that the NPV of the project, if bad behavior, well, it is necessarily negative. So there is, in that case, there is wealth destruction. Okay, wealth destruction in that case. Okay, so let me, just to be sure, because it is, of course, very important. So are you familiar also with this notion of NPV? Okay, great. Okay, great, cool. Okay. Okay. So no problem if I erase everything. No, I can erase everything, right? No problem. I can do that. Yes. Okay. Right. So the first question was, what can we say about this these actually, because there are two assumptions. Well, we know that now. So the first is that NPV positive if good behavior, while NPV negative if bad behavior. Okay. Second question. What do the lenders obtain in case of failure of the project, since the entrepreneur is protected by the limited liability? Well, we know we have already answered this question. So in case of failure, if failure, well, they don't receive anything because the result of the project is zero and the entrepreneur is protected by the limited liability. Okay, very easy. So now let our lender denote what the lenders get in case of success of the project. So let's say our lenders in case of success. And we are just going to write this our lenders. Okay. Determine what the expected gains of the entrepreneur are if he behaves well or if he behaves badly. So this is quite easy actually, because the lender is residual claimant. That is to say, he's going to obtain the difference between the return of the project and the repayment to lenders. So expected gain, if the entrepreneur behaves well, in that case, probability of success of the project is going to be PH, and he's going to receive V minus R lenders plus 1 minus PH times what? 0. So this term just disappears. Okay, so we can remove this. Okay, and what about, because yeah, okay. So for the entrepreneur is going to receive this. Okay, so this corresponds to the return to the entrepreneur in case of success of the project, and this is 0 is just the return to the entrepreneur in case of failure of the project. And what about now for a given financial contract, what is the expected gains if the entrepreneur behaves badly? Well, what is going to change first is the probability of success, because the probability of success, well, this is no longer PH, it is now PL times the same. But now you have to take into account the private benefit, and remember that the private benefit is independent of the result of the project. So there is no need to multiply either by, to multiply, for instance, by PL. Okay, so do not forget the private benefit in case of a bad behavior. Okay, so Now, of course, what is the condition, let's say, under which um, an entrepreneur prefers to behave well than to behave badly? Well, it's very easy. So you have to take a decision about your behavior. Well, you are going to behave well if your expected gains in such a case are higher than your expected gains if you behave badly. Okay, very easy to understand. So let's say this is 1 and this is 2. Okay, so actually the entrepreneur is going to choose a good behavior if and only if 1 is higher than 2. Okay, you agree with that? You agree with that? Well, it's easy. Okay. Okay, great. So question 4. Compare the expected gains of the entrepreneur if he behaves well or if he behaves badly, and indicate what the optimal amount the lenders can obtain is in case of success of the project is such that the entrepreneur prefers to behave well than badly. So this is also very easy. Actually, what we have to compare is 1 which would be higher, greater than 2. So 1 greater than 2, this is equivalent to PH V minus R lenders being higher than PL V R lenders plus B, which is equivalent to V minus R lenders PH minus PL greater than V, which is V minus R lenders V over PH minus PL, or R lenders, which should be lower than R lenders max, which is equal to V minus B over PH minus PL. PH. Okay, so in other words, you cannot give everything to the, let's say, there is a problem of incentives. There is an incentive problem. Okay, so the entrepreneur must have enough incentive to choose to behave well rather than to behave badly. Okay. So let me explain to you in more details because this is actually important. So in order to make the entrepreneur prefer to behave well, he must have enough incentives to do it. Remember, this is 1, which should be higher than 2, right? And for this to be the case, well, V minus R lenders in case of success, so this should be high enough. This should be high enough. Why? Well, assume that R lenders in case of success is equal to V, right? In that case, you see that whether the project is a success or a failure, well, basically it's the same for the entrepreneur. So in that case, it is just impossible to induce him to behave well, because for him, for her, a success or failure is basically the same. So of course, in that case, what the entrepreneur is going to choose is to behave badly in order to receive the private benefit. Okay. So in other words, to induce him to prefer behaving well, the difference between what is going to get in case of success and what is going to obtain in case of failure should be high enough. And this is why there is a maximal amount which can be repaid to investors such that the entrepreneur prefers to behave well than to behave badly. Okay, so this is the idea behind the fact that at t equal 1 you cannot repay everything the project pays to outside investors. It is to give enough incentives to the entrepreneur to make him choosing the good behavior. Okay, do you understand the mechanics? Is that clear? Is that clear? There is a name associated with the constraint, let's say the inequality, 1 greater than 2. It is called the incentive compatibility constraint of the entrepreneur. Okay. We're feeling all right. We are almost done with this point. Yes. I think if you have questions, it's better to ask question when you have your question and not later. Okay. Okay. Okay, so what is the maximum amount the lenders can obtain? Well, you know that. We know that already. So now, question 5. Question 5. By using our lender max, compute the expected gains of the lenders. Compare these expected gains to the investment and give a condition about V, which, if satisfied, implies that the lenders are going to accept to finance the project. So what we know is that our lenders max is equal to V minus B over PH minus PL. So for outside investors, actually what they are going to receive is PH, our lenders max. Why PH? Because this is compatible, well, this amount, because our max lenders is such that the incentive compatibility constraint of the incentive compatibility constraint of the entrepreneur is satisfied, So PH times R max lender has to be greater than the initial investment. Okay. So the name of this new constraint is participation constraint of not of the entrepreneur, but of outside investors. So in other words, if this inequality is satisfied, well, outside investors accept to finance the project at equal 0. They accept to invest capital I at equal 0. But if this inequality is not satisfied, that is to say, if the inequality is in this direction, they refuse to finance at equal 0 the project, because they know that for them, they are not going to receive enough money at equal 1 to make a positive profit, right? Okay, so we can say a little bit more. By replacing, so we can write that PH V minus B over PH minus PL should be greater than capital I. In that case, outside investors accept finance project at t equals 0. Okay, so, well, it's easy to, and by the way, delta p, so this is a notation, this is delta p. So this is basically that V should be greater than capital I over pH plus B over pH minus PL. So this is the inequality that we obtain. Okay. So there are some questions now. Why? Okay. So let me, this is value of V, right? From 0. Only, we consider only positive values. So there is I divided by pH here, let's say here. And here, let's say you've got I divided by pH plus B over pH minus PL, right? So now tell me, where is the NPV of the project positive? What is the threshold on V above which the project has a positive NPV? So I repeat. What is the minimal value of V such that the project NPV is positive? Yes, precisely. That's right. It is capital I divided by pH. You're right. You're perfectly right. And this is very important. You see why. So here, NPV is negative. So of course, we are not interested in all these cases. I mean, the interval over there. But in this open interval, you see that the NPV of the project is positive. Okay. But now there is another important question, which is what is the minimal value of V such that outside investors are ready to finance project? Exactly. Very good, perfect, exactly. So people are ready, I mean, outside investors are ready to finance the project only if V is above this threshold. Not that one, not the previous one, not the first one, not that one, that one. So what about if V belongs to this interval? What is going to happen in that case? In this interval, what is going to happen? Then what? Who has an idea about this? Yes, entrepreneur will behave badly, that's right. And And what? So you've got the answer. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Come on. No, you don't want to tell me the answer? Why? Do not hesitate. Well, then there is no financing. Whereas there is no financing even if the NPV is positive. So in that case, we are talking about a problem of credit rationing. There is credit rationing. So in this interval, that one, in this interval, there is credit rationing. Okay, so in other words, so in this in that interval, that one, there is credit rationing. The meaning of credit rationing is that the project in itself is associated with it's a good project in the sense that the NPV of this project is strictly positive. So this is a project which creates wealth, value, okay, with a wealth creation. But due to the moral hazard problem, outside investors refuse to finance this project. Okay, so in this interval, in the interval yes, in this, if P belongs to the interval blah blah blah, there is credit rationing. Credit rationing means that a project with a positive NPV is not financed. Okay, so okay, let's say if, well, consider a project with a negative NPV. So a project with a negative NPV which is not financed, this is not credit rationing. This is normal life, okay? Because you don't want to finance a project which is going to destroy value. Okay, so I repeat, a project associated with a negative NPV, if this project is not financed, it's normal, because this project is going to destroy value. So you don't want to put your money in such a project. You prefer strictly to keep your money with you. Okay, but this is not what we are talking about in this example. So in this example, there is an interval for which the project is associated with a positive NPV. So this is definitely a project which creates value. This is, let's say, a good project. But this project is not financed due to the moral hazard problem. That is to say, in order to induce the entrepreneur to behave well, we cannot repay in case of success to outside investor capital V. and therefore the participation constraint of the investors is not satisfied, and the investors refuses to finance the project. Okay, so in that case, there is credit rationing. So once again, credit rationing is a case in which a project with a positive NPV is not financed. Credit rationing, a project with a positive NPV is not financed. But by the way, let me ask you a question. Who is going to suffer from credit rationing in this case? So in other words, who is going to suffer from the moral hazard problem? What do you think? Yes, the entrepreneur. Perfect. So who is going to suffer from the moral hazard problem, which implies credit rationing? Well, of course, the answer is the entrepreneur. So why is it the case? Why? Well, the answer is easy, because the project, the entrepreneur wants to realize is not financed. Yes, because they don't receive financing. Exactly. They don't receive financing. Exactly. But outside, let's say, outside investors are going to invest somewhere else. Okay, so the one who is suffering from this credit rationing problem is definitely the entrepreneur. Okay, so this is very crucial. You really have to understand, to be familiar with a model of credit with moral hazard. Okay, so once again, you really have to be familiar with a credit market with moral hazard. Okay, because I think it is very important. So you remember I told you that what is important is more ideas than recipes. And I believe that this is a good example of this, because if you understand how a credit market works in case of a moral hazard problem, this is something that is going to be helpful in some extent all your life, at least your working life. Okay, so is that clear for everybody? Do not hesitate to ask me questions. So no questions so far, really? No, really? Okay. There may be one question. Someone is typing something, is writing something. No, not for me. Ah. Okay, explaining what? The conclusion, what? The mechanism, what? Okay, I see. Okay, great. Okay, I see your point. Okay. Okay, let's do that. So positive NPV. This is the case as long as it's positive. So this is V higher than I divided by pH. So if we got V, there we have 0, and here we have R, capital I divided by pH. So in this interval, we have positive NPV. But for the project to be financed, the participation constraint of the entrepreneur has to be satisfied. And this is going to be the case if pH V minus B over pH minus PL is higher than capital I. And this is equivalent to V being higher than capital I over pH plus B of pH minus PL. So it is, let's say, here. So now, where financing is granted is the red interval. Granted. So you see that in the green interval, that one, in the green interval, so in the green interval, so in the green interval, the project NPV is positive, but outside investors refuse to finance project. So in other words, in the green interval, there is credit rationing. That's the way it is. Is that clear now? Is that clear? Is that clear? Okay, great. Okay. So we are almost done now. It's almost time. Just a few words about something also very important that we're going to do tomorrow is actually to look at the coexistence. Yes, the coexistence between direct financing and intermediated financing. Why? Because in real world, there is definitely coexistence between intermediated financing. For instance, if an entrepreneur is using a land from is For instance, if an entrepreneur borrows from a bank, so the banking debt, what is most of the time just called debt, and direct financing, as we saw already, either by issuing equity or by issuing bonds on the financial markets. Okay, so until now we have studied what could justify the existence of a bank as a financial intermediary. So that's done. So I know that it is quite of the hard part of the course. So it's done. Now it's over. Well, except that we're gonna do some exercises, but no more on this. Okay, I promise. And so before talking about banking regulation and banking crisis, we are going to see a possibility, a model, a very simple model, which can explain the coexistence between direct and intermediated financing. So between firms, let's say, which are using either equity or bonds to finance their activities, and others which are more using debt obtained from a bank. Okay. So yeah, a few words about that, because actually exerting effort, this is a generic term, and it is related to good behavior. Good behavior. Okay, so basically it is what we were talking about in the previous case. Okay, and okay, just a few words about private benefits. So here you have examples. Well, the list is not exhaustive, but you have examples of private benefit. Like empire building. Why? Because people like power. Okay, so managers like large firm power, and so on and so forth. If you build an empire, you're going to travel all around the world every day. So this is something going from luxury hotels to luxury hotels. So this is something that managers like. The problem is not about building an empire, but most of the time an empire, the return associated with an empire is less important than if you compare to the same business, but if you cut the empire, that's the point. Okay, then it becomes a problem if building an empire is not going to maximize the return for investors. In that case, we are talking about private benefit. So another example is about sustaining family control. So of course, if your daughter or your son is very talented, well, this is not a problem. If in that case, we are not talking about a private benefit. But let's say if your daughter or your son is not as efficient as you, and you want her or him to be the next CEO, then this is private benefit, because you are going to enjoy from a particular benefit in the case in which this is either your daughter or your son who is going to succeed in your position, but this is not efficient. If this is not efficient, we are talking about private benefit. Then, of course, there are pet projects, perks like buying a Ferrari, or I don't know, a luxury good, and of course, in terms of time, work, which is good behavior, versus, well, spending your time doing golf or something else which is not related to maximizing the value of the firm. These are examples of private benefit, but once again, the list is not exhaustive. Okay, so we are almost done for today. Do you have questions? Nothing? Really? Absolutely nothing? Well. If this is the case, I think we can stop the lecture for today. No question? Sure? Okay, so I think it's time to stop. So enjoy. It's time to stop. Sorry. Enjoy your time, and see you tomorrow. Sorry, just one question. Yes, I agree. The private benefits most of the time are for top leaders, but even if you consider small entrepreneurs, for small entrepreneurs, you can also consider private benefit. But the value of the private benefit, of course, depends on the size of the firm. So, okay, great. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye bye. Bye bye. Goodbye. See you.
You are